So you thought Photoshop was easy, isn't it? It isn't. It's so hard you cannot even imagine. Let me show you how hard it is. So here we are in our Finder or Explorer, and let's drag and drop this subject photo into Photoshop. Alright, and let's say we want to change the background. Let me show you how hard it is. First of all, let's unlock the background layer. Just click on the lock and then just bring in the new background. So you're gonna go back to our Finder or Explorer, just drag and drop the background, right? Pretty hard, right? Very hard. And let's make the background a little bigger. So hard, isn't it? And let's take it a little up. Okay, now we want the background to be behind the subject, right? So we take the background behind the subject layer and we select the subject layer, and then we just open up our properties. It's so hard finding out the properties, and then it's so hard clicking on this button called remove background. And we have changed the background with so much difficulty, right? Now we have to like move it accordingly. Now we have to crop it accordingly. Maybe show more of the sky, just like so. See how hard that was? If you haven't gotten the joke yet, I'm so sorry. Photoshop is simple if we just understand the concepts. That's it. And speaking of concepts, let's start from ground up. First of all, what the hell is Photoshop? Photoshop is a program or a software to create and edit images made up of pixels. Now, what is a pixel? Well, pixel is a small box with just one color. Just one. Now, one or more pixels come together to create an image for you. Let me show you an example. Look at this box right there. What does it have? Just one color, right? And that, my friend, is a pixel. Right next to it is another box with a different shade of pink than the first one. Right next to it is another box, maybe with the same or different color. Now, all of these pixels come together to create an image for you. Let's take a look. And there you have it. Usually, a good quality standard photograph has at least 1 million pixels. And that's why in general terms, we use it as a standard and we call it mega. And therefore, when you watch advertisements of cameras or smartphones, they say this smartphone camera can capture images of 12 megapixels or 24 megapixels. Now you know what they mean. This means that these cameras can capture images which have 12 million pixels. In other words, 12 megapixels. Make sense? Let me show that to you. Have a look at this image again. It has a lot of details, right? Even if you zoom in, see how much details this has? And you can zoom in a lot into this image. You know why? Because it has a lot of pixels. Now, how many pixels, you might ask? Have a look right there at the bottom. Now, if you cannot see the resolution, you can click on this arrow right there and then choose Document Dimensions. It will show you the dimensions. Now, this is 5142 pixels wide, which means from here to the right end, you have 5142 pixels stacked up by 5142 pixels in height. So from top to bottom, you have 5142. So to find the entire number of pixels, we multiply both of them. So 5142 into 5142. What should be the result? It should be somewhere around 26.4 million pixels. Therefore, we can say that this image, my friend, is 26.4 megapixels. The lesser the number of pixels, the lesser the details. Therefore, have a look at another version of this image. Look at the resolution, 1000 by 1000, which means 1 million pixels or 1 megapixel. Not much. That one was 26.4. This is just one. If you zoom in, you will have a look. This one doesn't have much details compared to the previous one. If you zoom in, it has a ton more details. So why are we talking about pixels? Now you must be thinking, I came here to learn Photoshop. Why is this crazy guy going on and on about pixels? Well, there's a reason. Any graphic that is made up of pixels, we call it raster graphics. Anything made up of pixels, is a raster graphic. Now, Photoshop is a software that creates and edits raster graphics. That's it. Photoshop is a raster graphic editing and creation software. Now you might ask, is there any other kind of graphic? Yes, of course. There is vector graphic. Now raster graphics are based on pixels, whereas vector graphics are based on mathematics. It's not at all based on pixels. And one of the most popular software to create and edit vector graphics is undoubtedly Adobe Illustrator. Let me show you a quick example. So here we are in Adobe Illustrator and just take a look at this illustration. It's so adorable, isn't it? Now this is a vector graphic, my friend, which means it's based upon mathematics, not at all pixels, which also means since this is not based on pixels, no matter how much you zoom in, this will never pixelate because there's no pixels. So let's zoom in even more. This will just never pixelate. Never ever. So this, my friend, is a vector graphic. But that is something for another class. For now, let's focus on Photoshop. Now what can you do with Photoshop? Well, the possibilities are only limited by pixels. What do we mean by that? Well, anything that you can imagine that can be created with pixels can be achieved with Photoshop. So let's say you want to replace the sky. What are we doing? Just changing some pixels, right? So it can be done with Photoshop. So you want to make the nose a little bigger. What are we doing? Just manipulating the pixels. Can it be done with Photoshop? Of course, yes. Whenever it has to deal with pixels, changing the pixels, creating the pixels, or even vanishing the pixels, anything to deal with pixels, anything you can imagine that can be created or deleted or manipulated with pixels can be done with Photoshop. Now let's open up Photoshop and understand what's on the screen. Always keep in mind that you are more powerful and intelligent than Photoshop. That Photoshop is just a tool to help you express yourself as an artist. Never let that intimidate you. Let's take a look. When you open Photoshop for the first time, this is what you see. This is Photoshop 2020. If you're using a previous version, you might be seeing something different. Now keep in mind, this is the home screen. Alright. As soon as you click on the Photoshop logo right there, it takes you to the Photoshop workspace. Workspace is where you work. Simple, right? Again, if you click on the home icon, it's gonna take you to the home screen. So self-explanatory. Now, as you begin working on the project, this area right here will begin to show you your previous project that you work on so that you can easily access your recent projects. So let's say this is the project that I worked on first. I worked on it a little bit, I saved it, and then I closed it. Again, let's say this is the project I worked on again. This is another example, and then I worked on it and then I closed it. So as you can see, this area begins to show you your recent projects. You can easily access them by simply clicking on them. Easy? Right. Let's close that. It'll take you back to the workspace. Now, if you don't want to close the image and again go back to the home screen so that you can open up some more recent projects, you can always click on the home button right there. That file is already open. You can open another project from the recent list and both of them will be open for you. Simple stuff. Now do keep in mind that your workspace is very personal to you. You can customize it according to your needs and your workspace might be absolutely different from the one that I use. Alright, so let's open up the workspace. So I have my navigator, I have my layers panel, I have my channels panel, I have my tools open like this. You can adjust it in any way you want. Now, right now, it might look very confusing to you. So many buttons, so many menus, so many checkboxes. Don't be scared. If you're starting out, you can always go to Window, Workspace. I have a lot of workspace saved right there at the top. As you create a workspace, you can save them and it will show up right there at the top. However, there are some default workspaces. If you're working in 3D, you can choose a 3D workspace. If you're creating a painting, there's a painting workspace. If you're editing your photographs, there's a photography workspace, right? Let's choose the default, and that is Essentials. Once you choose Essentials, it also might look odd to you. you might want to go to Window, Workspace, and then reset Essentials, because I had used Essentials before and I moved things around here and there. So it has set to its previous essential. So you might have to choose Essentials and then again go to Window, Workspace, and then choose Reset Essentials. Alright, this is what the Essential Workspace looks like. Now, some of it is hidden beyond the screen. You know why? Because I scaled it. I made the screen a little bigger so that you can see things clearly. So yours might be a little different. So let's drag it up. And by the way, we don't need colors, swatches, gradients, and patterns. So we're gonna click on this grid right there and close tab group. Everything in that group will be closed. Close tab group. And there is a Learn tab where you can learn Photoshop. There are some basic tutorials that you can use. There's libraries, there's adjustments. We don't need all of them as well. So close tab group. Layers is important, channels is important, paths is important. So these are the three we are keeping at the moment. Now you can keep all the tools in just one line, or you can simply click on this button. That way the tools will be in 2 lines and they will be shortened a little bit. So that is a very simple workspace that you can use. All I keep for my personal use is layers, channels, paths right there. Right here you have the properties, and on top of that you have the history panel. Again, your choice of workspace and the way you design it might be absolutely different from me, and you will discover it along the course of this tutorial. Just keep in mind to only include the panels and the tools that you need, not more than that. Have the cleanest workspace possible. Let me share with you one more tip. You can also change the Photoshop UI color by simply going to Edit and then Preferences. On a Mac, that would be Photoshop and then Preferences. So if you're using a Mac, Photoshop would be right here. You would have to click on that and then choose Preferences. On a Windows, Edit and then Preferences. Now inside of Preferences, let's go to Interface. Here are a couple of colors that you can choose from. This is dark gray. This is the default, lighter one, and even more lighter one. The default works for me. Maybe for some people, darker gray works better, but this is perfect for me. Hit OK. Choose whatever you're comfortable with. By the way, let me quickly open up the navigator so that you can see me on the screen by going to Window, and then this is not for you. This is just for me. And here you will see navigator, and I'm gonna just put it at the top so that you can see me, and let me adjust it accordingly. I have already saved my workspace, so let me quickly load that. There you go. This is the one that I was using, Unmesh 9. Let's reset that. All right, we're good now. So you have the same layers, channels, and paths, and at the top you have the navigator. Same thing, properties and history panel. And here you have all the tools you need. Now it might look like there are a bazillion things on screen and it might start to confuse us, but trust me, there are just 3 major things to keep in mind. Just 3 things. Let's create a brand new document to understand what these 3 things are. Let's go to File and then New to create a brand new document. That's going to show you a list of your recent documents, recent types of documents that you created. We're just going to choose Photo and choose the default Photoshop size and choose Create. Alright, now Photoshop screen consists of 3 major things, as I said before. Let us understand this with the help of an artist who paints. What does he have or she has? She has the tools like brushes, chisels, pencils, etc. Then of course, she has the palette where she mixes up colors and maybe add water, oil, change the parameters, so on and so forth. And finally, she has the canvas where the work is done. Similarly in Photoshop, you have the tools like the brush tool, the text tool, the pen tool, the blur tool, the move tool. These are the tools, just like an artist's tools. Then you have the panels like the layers panel, the channels, paths, all of these panels right there, even the properties panel, right? Layers panel is where we stack up all the layers. Then you have several other panels if you go to Window, and then if I choose color, you have a color panel. Then if you go to Windows again, you choose brushes, you have the brushes panel. Lots of panels where you can change the parameters, apply adjustments, so on and so forth. And then most importantly, the artist, which is you, has the canvas where he creates the masterpiece. So this, my friend, is the canvas that you see. And this is the document inside of which you have the canvas. Now you can dock in the documents like tabs. So if you just drag it and if you just drop it right there, you see the blue lines, it will be opened as a tab. So inside the document, you have the canvas. Now, if you open up other documents, if you create other documents by going to File and then New, let's create one more default Photoshop size document and we can name this Document 2. Otherwise, it would be named Untitled like this one was named. So we have two documents, Document 1 and Document 2. You can also just drag it apart and make it separate. So this is Document 2. You can also drag it and take it apart from the tab. So Document 1, Document 2. You can also stack it as tabs by simply going to Window, Arrange, and then Consolidate all to tabs, or by simply just dragging it and sticking it up right there. To summarize, when you open Photoshop, you have two things, the home screen and the workspace. The home screen is where you have all your recent files and maybe you can access your Lightroom photos, cloud documents, so on and so forth in Photoshop 2020. And then if you click on the Photoshop logo, the workspace opens. Workspace is where you will spend most of your time, if not all of your time. It is the place where we will work to create our masterpiece. Now, when you open the workspace, it has three major things. What are those? Number one, tools. Just like the tools of an artist, you have your tools that you're gonna use to create awesome art or edit photos. Next, you have, just like an artist's palettes, you have panels like the layers panel, channels, paths, properties, and so much more. And at the end, the most important one, you have your canvas inside the document. So you can open several documents, but most importantly, you have the canvas where you create the masterpiece. Just to give you another tip, you can also change the background color of your canvas to whatever you like. So by default, it is a dark gray color. If you right click, you can choose black, you can choose medium gray, you can choose light gray, or you can also choose a custom color. So if you choose select custom color, and if you have any color in mind that you want to use, I want to use white. Hit OK. It'll show you white every time you click on custom from now on. So for this one, let's keep it at black. Now let's take a look at all of these three elements in detail. First of all, let's understand the tools. Now you can set all the tools in one line, as I said before, by simply clicking on this arrow. That way all of them will be in one line. All right, I like it in two lines. Now, if you are not seeing any tool right there, if something is missing, you can always reset the tools or bring in something more or take away the tools you do not need by simply clicking on these three dots right there and choosing Edit Toolbar, right? If you don't need, let's say, the Artboard tool, you can just drag it to Extra Tools. That tool won't be there. Right here, let's say if you don't need this tool, which is the Frame tool, you can actually take it away momentarily because you don't want so much clutter around there. So take it to the right hand side. If you want to reset everything, just simply click on Restore Defaults and everything will be set to defaults. If your tools are not okay, if something is not looking right, you can simply click on Restore Defaults and click on Done. Now, whatever tool you choose, for example, right now the Move tool is selected. The property of that tool, whatever is chosen, will be shown at the top bar. This is the property. All of these properties are of the Move tool. Let's choose another tool. Let's choose, let's say, the Zoom tool. All of the properties of the Zoom tool are going to show up. For example, if you want to zoom in 100%, click on 100%. If you want to fit to screen, click on Fit to Screen. If you want to fill to screen, click on Fill to Screen. Everything related to that tool, which in this case is the Zoom tool, will show up at the top. In other words, it is the tool options. So let's choose the Blur tool. It will have the settings related to the blur tool. How much strength of the blur? What would be the blend mode of that tool? Similarly, every tool, I'm just reiterating, every tool has its own set of properties related to that tool. And that is something you will find at the top. So here you have the tools on the left hand side, and as you select each tool, the properties of that tool will show up at the top. Now let us briefly discuss the 4 most important tools in Photoshop. And the first one is, of course, the Move tool. The shortcut of this tool is V. If there's something I want you to remember for eternity, that is going to be the letter V. You're going to be using it the most. So any tool that you're in, if you want to move something, you want to get to the Move tool, and for that just press V. It will take you to the Move tool. It is used for simply moving stuff. Alright, so let's say in the layers panel, I choose this text which says Unmesh. That is my name, and of course, as you can see, it's my face. So if I choose Unmesh right there, and if I'm in the Move tool, I can actually move it anywhere I want. So that's what it is for, moving. So if I want to move something else, so let's say keep creating text, I choose that and I can move it. Right now I'm having to select the layer and then move it. However, if I want to just have the ability to click on anything and that layer will automatically be selected, you can always check auto select, and then you can click on something and automatically that layer will be selected. This is something I do not recommend because sometimes some layers are stacked up just one top of one another and it can be difficult to get to the layers at the bottom. So I usually keep it unchecked and select the layers and then move accordingly. You can also hold Command or Control momentarily to just momentarily check auto select. So I can click on that and that layer will be selected, and then when I release the control, it just unchecks it. So that is a simple little tip. Again, just a quick reminder, what is the shortcut for the Move tool? V. Don't forget it. Alright, let's get back. Now you have one more control right there. That is Show Transform Control checkbox. If you check it, whatever layer is selected or object is selected, it will always show up with transform controls. No matter if you have pressed Control or Command T or not, which is for the transform controls, we're going to discuss that later. If you have done that or not, doesn't matter. If you keep it checked, it will always show up the transform controls. Even if you select keep creating unmeshtinda.com or whatever is selected, even if this rectangle is selected, it will always show up the transform controls. Transform controls simply allow you to make it larger or smaller, squeeze it or make it taller. Just transform it in any way you want. So you can make it smaller if you wish to, you can squish it if you want, and we're going to discuss these controls later. Just keep in mind that if you have the Move tools selected and you have checked Show Transform Control, it'll always show that transform control. I usually keep it checked off. And you have a lot of other settings that we can discuss later. The next most important tool is the Brush tool. And the shortcut for that one is, guess what? Brush starts with the letter B. So B is the shortcut. Again, what is the shortcut of the Move tool? It's not M, it is V. V for the Move tool, B for the Brush tool. Don't forget it. I promise you, by the end of this tutorial, you'll just remember all of the shortcuts by heart. I'll just keep reminding you. Okay, B for the Brush tool. Now with the Brush tool, let's create a brand new layer at the very top by clicking on this plus or the new layer button right there. You have the new layer, and in that new layer, right? Layers are just layers. We can paint on it. We can add some images on it, right? You can choose whatever brush you choose. Remember what we talked about? Whatever tool we choose, the options and the properties of that tool is going to show up at the top. All right. And let's choose a brush. If we simply click on this little arrow, lots of brushes are going to show up. So I'm going to choose this brush. It's based on pen pressure, and you can paint whatever you want. So I'm going to take white color. So this is the color that it's going to paint with. So you have the foreground color and the background color. So whatever color is in the foreground, you paint with it. That color is chosen for the brush. You can press X to toggle between the foreground and the background. So let's say you're just painting with two colors, white and black. So in the background, you kept black, and in the foreground, you kept white. So let's say you're continuously painting with white. You just press X and it switches to black, and then you start painting with black. All right. If you double click on the foreground, the color picker is going to show up, and you can choose whatever color you want from right here. We're going to discuss all of this later, but right now let's keep it at white, and you can paint or write whatever you want. I can simply write my name and it writes beautifully. There are some crazy funky brushes as well. If you just go down, you can also download a ton of brushes. So if you choose wet media brushes, look at the amount of brushes you have. You have real oil painting brushes. You have, if you choose inside dry media, you have pencil. You have this pencil brush, which is very cool as well. You have this some crazy Palooza brush, which looks like a chalk, which is amazing. So you can just experiment with choosing different kinds of brushes, paint with it, just go crazy and experiment with whatever you want. This is your canvas. Create your next masterpiece. Let me delete all of that mess. So you can simply delete that layer and everything you did on that layer will just go away. Now you might be thinking, how am I adjusting this to the screen? How am I fitting this to the screen? So let's say you have zoomed in this much and you want to just zoom out and adjust it according to the screen and fit it to the screen. You can simply press the shortcut Control or Command 0. It simply fits it. The next tool which is important is the text tool. And the shortcut for that one is, guess what? T. Again, shortcut for the move tool, V. As you can simply see, the symbol T is for the text tool. We can select that and we can create a text box. By default, it will fill it with lorem ipsum text, right? This is just for sample to give you an idea of how the text is going to look with the current font. You can select all of it and type whatever you want. So Photoshop is awesome. It actually is. So you can select all of it again. And what did we learn? For every tool, the option is going to be at the top. You can choose whatever font you want, the font size. You can change the font from right here. You can change how it is aligned. So left align, middle, right. All right. Lots of other settings. To type in text independently, you can also choose the text tool and then just click. It'll just start typing from right there. The fourth important tool, and this is one of those tools that you're going to be using all the time without even selecting it, and that is, my friend, the zoom tool. Whenever you're working, of course, you just need to zoom in and zoom out and move around, right? And for that, you can choose the zoom tool if you want. So this is the zoom tool. If you click on it, the magnifying glass will show up. If you scrub to the left, it's going to zoom out. If you scrub to the right, it's going to zoom in. Only if scrubby zoom is checked. If you uncheck that way it'll just open up as a rectangle. So if you want to zoom in just this particular area, just create a rectangle around it. That area will be zoomed in. Not very convenient. Just check scrubby zoom, and that way just drag to the left to zoom out and drag right to zoom in. Now you don't have to always select the zoom tool to zoom in and zoom out and get back to the brush tool or whatever tool you were using. Let's say I was using the brush tool, right? I was painting right here with all the fun and the enjoyment. I'm zooming in, working on right there. Now let's say I want to zoom in. I don't have to click on the zoom tool, zoom in right there and get back to the brush tool. That's very cumbersome. Instead of doing that, you just use a shortcut, and the shortcut is Control and Spacebar. You hold both of them. On a Mac, that would be Command and Spacebar. And then you drag to the right to zoom in, drag to the left to zoom out. And when you're done zooming, release both of those keys and it'll get you back to your tool that you were using. Now we have talked a lot about tools. Let's move on and understand panels. So just as an artist, you have the tools. And just as an artist, you have your palettes. In Photoshop terms, panels. You can also call it palettes if you want. So the most important panel in Photoshop is layers. It is the heart of Photoshop. Layers is nothing but just layers. Let me demonstrate. It'll give you an idea of what layer does. So this, my friend, is a blank document. It has nothing in it. These checker box just say that it is absolutely transparent. Now, if you look at the layers panel, I have a lot of layers, but I have turned them off. I have hidden them. To show the layers, you click on the box next to it. The eye shows up. That means the layer is showing up. So let me show you what layers built up this Instagram post that I created in Photoshop. So this is my face. First, I loaded that in as a layer. Think of it as sheets of transparent paper on which we paint stuff. All right. The first one is a sheet of transparent paper on which I painted my face. On top of that, I placed two more transparent paper to color it a little bit. just like this. On top of it, I placed one more transparent paper and painted a rectangle on it, just like this. On top of it, I placed one more transparent paper. On that, I drew another rectangle, right? On top of it, one more transparent paper. On that, we have the text. And therefore, we have several layers. Now, why do we create layers? Why don't we just do it all in the same thing? You see, layers allow us to adjust different elements separately and edit them later at any point in time. By giving us the freedom to keep the elements separate, we can move them around, we can transform them separately, or even change the properties of it. Let me show you an example. Have a look. The website text here is on a separate layer, so I can change it to whatever I want. If we just double click on the T, we can change it to any website we desire. Isn't that interesting? Now let's say you want to position the rectangle differently. So you can simply choose the rectangle. You can just adjust it in whatever way you want. And by the way, I showed up the transformation controls by pressing Control or Command T, T for transform. And if you want to control the transform, or if you want to command the transform, you press the Control and then press T, which just means control transform. In Mac's terms, command the transform. Make sense? So command transform, control transform. The transform tool is going to show up. Now you can adjust it, make it bigger, make it smaller. If you hold the shift key, then you can make it longer, shorter, whatever you want. Now, if all of this was just in one layer, let's merge all of these layers. Click on this grid right there in the layers panel. And then if we choose merge visible, it should be right there. All of this now is in just one layer. Now we cannot change anything separately. You just can't. Choose the move tool. You just cannot move anything separately. You cannot change the text. You cannot change the coloring. You cannot move the rectangle. It's all locked. And that is why we create layers. And that is why layers is the heart of Photoshop, allowing us to create things in different layers and keep things separate. And also, you can just layer up and create amazing composites just by using this heartbeat of Photoshop, that is the layers panel. Now let's talk about documents and canvas. Now some of you might know that I create YouTube tutorials, and for YouTube you need to create something which is called a thumbnail, and that thumbnail has to be catchy so that people click on it. So I designed 2 thumbnails for a video, and I usually do several versions and choose the best in the end. And therefore I have 2 documents open. You can just separate these documents. Right now they are consolidated into tabs. So you can just drag it out, drag out the second documents. Right now they are open, they are floating. If you want to consolidate them back into tabs, as we learned before, you can go to Window, Arrange, and consolidate all to tabs. One other thing that you can do, and this is from my real world usage. If you're into photography, if you're into design, and if you want to compare 2 or more things or work on 2 or more things simultaneously, this is something that's going to be really very helpful for the real world. If you want to set them side by side, you have 2 of them open. You can go to Window, Arrange, and then 2 up vertical or 2 up horizontal. However you want to arrange it, it shows you a small preview. So I want to choose 2 up vertical. Now these are open side by side vertically. Now what I can do is, if I want to compare it to see which one would look better on YouTube, I would zoom out both of them equally. There's a way you can zoom both of them out proportionately equally. We can discuss that later, but for right now, we just zoomed out. And then if you right click on the outside and choose custom white as the canvas background, because YouTube has white as the background for the most part, now you can compare which one looks better. Right? You have 2 of them open side by side and it works awesome. Now, since we were talking about zoom tool a little bit before, that you don't have to go to the zoom tool, you can just simply hold the Control or Command and spacebar and drag to the right to zoom in, drag to the left to zoom out. There's also one more shortcut, and that is Control plus to zoom in or Control minus to zoom out. Again, what is the shortcut for the move tool? V, brush tool. B, zooming in, Control and spacebar, Command and spacebar, drag right or left, Control plus to zoom in, Control minus to zoom out. Easy, right? Remember the shortcuts. Now zooming is not enough. Moving around is important too. Let's say you were working on this photo and maybe you were lightening up the wrinkles. So for that we will choose, let's say, the spot healing brush tool, and then we are zoomed in, and then we are just painting over the wrinkles and removing them, which is pretty cool. Now to move around, you can just use the sliders right there, which is very difficult and time consuming. Move to the other parts of the face. One easy shortcut to move around the image is holding the space bar. See, when you hold the space bar, the cursor changes to a hand, and then you can click and drag to move. See how easy that is? Now once you're zoomed in, let me give you one more tip. If you hold the H key, the hand tool again shows up, but as long as you're holding the H key and you click and hold, you see the square right there? It's going to give you a preview of the entire image, and if you want to zoom into some other part of the image very quickly, you hold the H key, the square shows up, and you move the square wherever you want, and then when you release the mouse, it'll just zoom in right there. Release the H key and it'll take you back to the brush. If it doesn't take you back to the brush, what is the shortcut? B for the brush tool. Now coming to the most useful feature of Photoshop, and that is transform. And lately, it has gained some controversy as well. Let's not get into the controversy. If you are in Photoshop 2020 or Photoshop 2018, you don't have to worry about anything. Photoshop 2019 was notorious for irregular transform behavior. So let's not get there because it can take a little bit of explaining to understand what happened then. Now it's all fixed. So Photoshop 2020, if you're using, or if you're using any previous version of Photoshop, you don't have to worry about that other than 2019. So let's say you're using Photoshop 2020. And in here, if you press Ctrl or Command T, right, the transform control is gonna show up for that layer or the object that is selected. So let's say I select this rectangle right there, this rectangle, and then I press Ctrl or Command T. The transform control shows up. Now, if you drag it from the corner, it'll make it larger and maintain the proportion of the rectangle, right? If you drag from the centers, it will also make it larger from that center and then also maintain the proportion as well. Similarly, if you do it from right here, it'll make it larger from that point, but also maintain the proportion. However, if you hold the Shift key and then when you make it larger from the corner or any other points, it will not maintain the proportion. I'm holding the Shift key, and then if I use this point as well, it is not maintaining the proportion. Alright, now if you're using an older version of Photoshop, this might totally be opposite. Now let me show you what is it like in any older version of Photoshop. And you can actually use transform like the older version of Photoshop even in Photoshop 2020 by changing the preferences. If you go to Edit and then Preferences, if you're using a Mac, that would be under Photoshop and then Preferences. Right now everything is grayed out. Why? Because the transform here is still on. It's still right there. Hit Enter, just commit it, just apply it or click somewhere else, and then go to Edit and then choose Preferences. Now inside of Preferences, let's click General. Now inside General, if you check Use Legacy Free Transform, what happens is it will make the transform behave like the older versions of Photoshop. If you hit OK now, press Ctrl or Command T, if you just drag the points and I'm not holding the Shift key, it will not maintain the proportions. As soon as you hold the Shift key, it begins to maintain proportion. Just the opposite. So whatever suits you best, you can use that. If you're starting out with Photoshop 2020 and if you're not used to the older versions, I would always suggest you to go to Edit and then Preferences, and inside of that, General, and check it off. Use the new ways. Check it off and hit OK. Get used to it. Because maybe down the line after 5 or 6 years, maybe Photoshop might just remove that option. So get used to the new way. When it comes to transform, there's a lot to learn and you can go as deep into it as you want. Let me show you one more example, and this is kind of important. So if I choose my photo right there and then I press Ctrl or Command T, this is actually a very large photo. Let's make it a little smaller, just like this. Now let's press Ctrl or Command T again. If I hold the Alt key or the Option key and drag one of these corner points, it will make it larger from the center or wherever you have the anchor point, right? If you want to make it larger from this eye or maybe from this point in the hair, just move the anchor point right there, and then when you hold the Alt key or the Option key, it'll make it larger from that point, wherever you have the anchor point. If you want to make it larger with chin as the center, you can move the anchor point right there or simply hold the Alt key and click anywhere to move the anchor point there. And then when you hold the Alt key or the Option key, make it larger, it'll make it larger or smaller from that point. By the way, if you cannot see the anchor point, just make sure that this checkbox is checked. If it's unchecked, the anchor point would be hidden. It is still there, it's just that it's hidden. Just check it, it's gonna show up again. Now let me give you one more tip. If you want to make it narrower or wider, using that as a center, using the anchor point as a center, if you use one of these points, it's just making it larger or smaller. It's also not maintaining the point, taking into consideration none of that. You have to hold the Shift key to just make sure that it's not maintaining the proportion, and along with it, if you hold the Alt key, now it will use it as a center and make it shorter or longer using that point as the center. Make sense? I hope it does. Two more important things in the Photoshop interface is the menu bar and the status bar. So menu bar is whatever you see at the top. This is for giving certain commands or opening up certain filters or adjustments. So if you want to, let's say, create a new file, you go to File, New. If you want to save it, File, Save. If you want to do something to the image, you go to Image and then maybe change the image mode from RGB to CMYK or from 8-bit to 16-bit, anything to deal with images. If you want to deal with layers, you have the Layers menu right there, and then you have several filters. So this at the top is the menu bar. Simple stuff. And at the bottom, you have the status bar. Now, what does the status bar do? Well, it's in the name. It shows you the status. Now, again, you might ask, the status of what? Well, whatever you want from the options, of course. So if you click on this arrow right next to the status bar, whatever you want to see the status of, you can choose. For example, if you choose document dimensions, it's going to show you the dimension of the document. So this document right here has 3744 pixels in width. From here to here, it has 3744 pixels. And in height, you have 5616 pixels. So 5616 pixels from top to bottom, right? If you want to see something else, like, let's say, document sizes or document profile, just click on that. This is untagged RGB color profile. All right, we're going to discuss all of that later. Now, a layer count. How many layers are there? So if I create several layers and start painting on it, see, it's going to show 6 layers are there. So layer number 5 and the background, 6 layers. The most important thing right here that I use is document dimensions or document profile. Dimensions is something I always keep it on. Sometimes I keep it on document profile to make sure what color space or color profile this image is using. For starters, you can keep it at document dimensions. This is going to always give you the resolution of the image that you're working on. By now, I'm guessing you might have developed an idea of what Photoshop is, how that works, what does the workspace contain, and how the different tools, panels, and canvas work together. 3 major things. Always remember: tools, panels, canvas. So just to summarize, when you open Photoshop, you see the Photoshop home screen. And if you click on the Photoshop icon or open a project, you see the workspace. Inside of the workspace, you have 3 major things: tools, panels, and canvas. Canvas is where you work on. Tools is what you work with. Panels or palettes is where you adjust stuff, change the properties, so on and so forth. Now let us discuss something which is the most important thing of learning any creative software, and that is the OCS of that software. Now what is OCS? Simply opening, creating and saving. Whenever you're learning a creative software, it is the most essential thing to learn how to open a file, create a file, and save a file. And that basically wraps up the purpose of that creative software. First of all, how to open a file? Pretty simple. You go to File and then Open. You want to open what? A file. So you go to File and then choose Open. File and choose Open. Now the shortcut for this is Control O. Now locate the file that you want to open, select that and simply choose Open. That file will be opened. Now is that how I open my files? Absolutely not. Maybe sometimes, but for the most part, I don't open files like that. I just simply drag it and drop it. Yes, you can do that. So let's say we are in our Finder and let's go for this image that we opened before. And all you gotta do to open this up separately in a separate document, just drag it and drop it right here. Not on the current canvas, right here where it says plus copy. Just open that up right there and it opens up as a separate document. Now, if you simply drag and drop over an existing canvas, that image is going to stack up over that image in the same document as a layer. So let's say this is already open. If I go back to my Finder or Explorer, and then when I drag this image and drop it over the canvas instead of right here, it'll just stack up over that just like a layer, right? If that's something you're up for, go for it. But if you want to open it actually as a document, then make sure to drag it and drop it right there, not inside the canvas. There you go. Now it's opened as a separate document. Now, how do we create a brand new document? By simply going to File and then New. You want to create a new file. So go to File, New. Simple step. Now there are lots of presets. If you go to Print, click on View All Presets. There's A5 size, there's A4 paper, there's letter size. Art and illustration, there are lots of presets that you can choose, right? Now you can modify it in any way you want. So let's say I want to name the project Learn Photoshop. Okay. And we can change the width and the height. First of all, we need to choose the units. Is it going to be pixels? Is it going to be inches? So I'm going to leave it at pixels. 1000 by 1000 pixel, which means width is going to be 1000, height is going to be 1000. All right. If it's something different, let's say width is more. Now it's showing you the orientation that this is going to be a horizontal image because the width is more than the height. You can change the orientation. If you click on this orientation, it'll just swap the width and the height. Okay. Artboard is not important now. We can discuss that later. Resolution. It doesn't really matter if you have chosen pixels as the unit. It won't matter. We're going to discuss that later again in the resolutions lesson. But for now, it's fine. Color RGB is good, 8-bit or 16-bit is good. Background, do you want to keep a white background or do you want to keep it just transparent? So we're going to go with white. Make sure the color profile is sRGB for most projects and hit create. And there you have your brand new document. Now let's learn how to save a file. Now here's when the file formats come into play. And we're going to learn about 3 important file formats right now. So let's say we are working on this image. We have several layers. So this is the background. This is the rectangle. On top of that, we have some text. And on top of that, we have our subject. And we want to save it. So let's go to File and choose Save As. If it's already saved, you have to just click on Save and it will save it with whatever changes you have made to the document. If you want to save it as a brand new document, you can choose Save As. If it's not saved already, you can simply choose Save. Okay. So right now it's already saved. So if you just press Ctrl or Command S, it'll just update the existing document with the changes you have made. If you go to File, Save As, it'll save it as a brand new document if you want that to. Now you have the option to save it in a lot of file formats. If you click on this drop down, there's a lot of file formats that you can choose from. The first one is obviously PSD, which stands for Photoshop document. So this will save the document as it is in Photoshop file formats with all the layers and the effects, everything intact, so that you can reopen it and start working from where you left off, maybe make some adjustments. So let us save it as Layers, New, and let's click on Save. Locate wherever you want to save it and click on Save. Maximize compatibility. Just make sure this is checked so that it's compatible with most versions of Photoshop and hit OK. Now when you open that folder in your Finder or Explorer and open that PSD file, Layers New, everything is intact. That text is intact, your subject is intact. You can change the text, decrease the opacity. Opacity is simply how much transparent it is. If the opacity is all the way to 100, it is opaque. If the opacity is all the way to 0 on the left hand side, none of it shows up. So it is just transparency. You can decrease the opacity and go from there. Everything is editable now. The other format is JPEG. JPEG allows you to save the image in very small size, and it's best for web, but everything will be baked in. You won't be able to edit it, and also JPEG does not support transparency. So if we go to File and then Save As, and we can choose JPEG from right there, JPEG, and let's name it Layers New or Layers Exported. We're gonna discuss saving and exporting in a future lesson in depth, but for right now, let's keep it at that. Keep it simple. Let's save it. And using this dialog box, you can control the quality. So the quality is from 0 to 12. The higher the quality, the higher the file size. Now, if you check preview, it's gonna show you if you change the quality, how it's gonna change the image. So let's zoom into the image and let me show you how quality changes it. So right now, with the highest quality, the file size is gonna be around 2 megabytes. If we just decrease the quality, we can decrease the file size. Right now, it's 380 KB. However, see the decrease in the quality. I'm not sure if you can see it. If we totally decrease the quality and if you zoom in, look how the quality of the image decreased, right? Look at the banding right there. If you increase the quality, all of that goes away. Hit OK, and it is baked in, saved. If you just open that folder, this is Layers Exported. Let's open that up in Photoshop and open that up as a brand new document. Have a look. It's just one layer. Everything is baked in. You cannot change the text or do anything right here. It's baked in, but it's very small size. So if you compare the size, if you go here, Layers New, look at the size. It's 20 MB, and this one is how much? This is just about 2 MB as it showed while we were saving it as JPEG. Now keep in mind, JPEG does not support transparency. What do you mean by that? So let's turn off all of these layers. Here we have the subject. It's absolutely transparent. Let's also turn off the shadow. Okay, we're gonna discuss that later, how to create shadows and everything. But it is transparent. There's nothing in the background. So if I go to File, and if we choose Save As, and if we choose JPEG right there, and let's name it subject1.jpg, and click on Save, hit OK. Now let's open up subject1. If you open that up in Photoshop, you will see it no more has a transparent background. It is just baked in white, right? If you open up any other image, and then if you just drag in the subject, let me just drag it in, the JPEG, it has a white background. It's not transparent. However, if you save it as a PNG, by the way, I just did undo. How do we step backward? Press Ctrl or Command Z to step backward, Control Shift Z to step forward. On a Mac, that would be Command in place of Control. Okay, so now let's delete this layer. Let's come back to our PSD file right there. This is transparent. Right now, if we go to File, Save As, and if we save as PNG, save as type, let's choose PNG, and let's name it subject2. All right, let's save it. Hit OK with the default setting. Now let's come to this image, and now if we drag in the PNG file, which was subject2, if we drag and drop it, you will see this has a transparent background. It is baked in, right? It is just one layer. You cannot edit stuff in there, but it does have a transparent background right now. So PNG supports transparency. It is a little larger size. JPEG is a smaller size, but everything is just baked in. It's great for web. PNG is also good for web. Then you have PSD. PSD is for saving a project file. If you want to get back to it and adjust something and continue working from where you left off, we should always have a PSD file saved for a project. So that is all for introduction here in the Photoshop Easy course. Our goal is to make Photoshop easy for you to understand. Is Photoshop easy? No. Is it simple? Hell yes. But keep in mind, it's only simple if we understand the concept. And we're gonna make it easy for you to do that. When it comes to Photoshop, I beg you, please never ever memorize the steps. If you understand the ins and outs of Photoshop, if you understand how your tools work, if you understand how the features work, how the properties work, how curves, levels, and all of these adjustment layers work, you can do things on your own. And that is our mission. I want you to be able to do things on your own without learning a particular step. By understanding how it works, whatever you imagine, you can achieve it by creating your own steps. That is the skill that I'm trying to teach you. If I teach you every step for achieving everything, you would be limited to the amounts of things that you can do in Photoshop. If you understand how it works, I believe you can do anything in Photoshop, anything that you can imagine. In this journey of learning Photoshop, you are not alone. And that's why we created this Photoshop online community, which you can join by using the links in the description. We are always there for you. I'm always there for you. And lots of other people who are learning Photoshop through this course are there to help you. Whatever questions you have or the exciting projects that you're working on, please post them. We are always here as a community to help each other. And to help you better remember Photoshop shortcuts, do not forget to download the Photoshop shortcut cheat sheet linked to this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys in the next lesson. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.